All right, welcome back to Relax and Fast, everybody. Today we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We're gonna look at the coaching side and the hosting of a meet side of track and field and ask Coach Eby on his perspective of that whole ordeal. We just recently hosted our home meet, the Dr. Taraski Team Challenge. So, Coach, going off of that, what were some challenges that you have faced with that particular meet and meets in the past?
Yeah, first off, I'm kind of excited to kind of dive into some of this stuff. You know, you mentioned yesterday, Dylan, that not a lot of people talk about this. Our sport is dying, and I don't feel like people are doing what's best for the sport. I feel like people are always doing what's best for their team, which is fine, and I understand that, and obviously we're in a car driving back from Boston because we were doing what was best for our handful of kids. But in the instance of the Dr. T meet, I think a challenge that I have, and I think a challenge a lot of people have, is we get back from these meets and we go to Ashland. Well, who won? We go to Boston. Who won? There are no winners. There are. You know, on an individual basis, there are winners and losers, but from a team aspect, there isn't. And when swimming goes to a big invitational, they score it. When wrestling goes to a big invitational, they score it. And so there are winners and losers, and you can do your regional rankings and your national rankings based off of these dual matches that they have for wrestling, these big invitationals and such. And so my goal with the Dr. T meet is to try to create a team challenge. The origins of the Dr. T meet was that we wanted to create something that was special and that could kind of mimic. So let me ask you this, Dylan. What is, and all of you, what is your favorite meet of the year?
It's conferences.
Conference.
Yeah.
Why?
The environment, the competition, the team aspect of it, you know, there's nothing like it.
Exactly. So why are we straying so far from that? You know, Ashland's a really good meet and there's some great performances that come out of that, but how many hours were we in that facility?
Yeah, you're right.
Do you really know what's going on with all of the other events? Like, you kind of get onto an island and you're just in this building for 12 hours at a time. And so I wanted to try to create this more succinct meet where we could get together and have team scores. So placing matters, team matters. I think our venue is a really cool venue to have something like that because everything is contained within a space, a closed space for that matter. And you can kind of wander around and cheer. And so we were trying to create a team challenge, but then also a conference challenge. And so we had 2 teams from the MIAA come down. We had 2 teams from the OAC. And then we had 2 teams from the NCAC. So it was Albion, Calvin, Otterbein, Baldwin Wallace, and then Ohio Wesleyan and Oberlin. And I very much appreciate Ohio Wesleyan and Oberlin because they've kind of been in this thing with us since the beginning. and that means a lot to me, you know? And so the first year we scored it, and we scored it by conference as well. And it was a really cool event, and the team got really into it, and the other teams got really into it, and there were some really good performances and some national caliber marks. And you know, we had a young lady run 4:54 in the mile, and we had some guys running in like the 14:30s and 40s in the 5K, and like there were some really good marks. You know, Zach Dysert was throwing the hammer, so I'm sure that went pretty far as well, right? And so it was a good meet, and the feedback that I got was great, and all of the teams said, yeah, we want to come back next year, and let's please keep hosting this thing. This was so awesome. Well, the next year, Otterbein bailed, the calendar switched, Otterbein bailed, and they went to the Ohio Northern meet. They've always supported the Ohio Northern meet, I get that. And so I begged John Carroll to come. And so he came, and then we realized last second that Calvin didn't have any entries in. So I called the Calvin coach, and they were like, oh, sorry, our budget got cut and we couldn't afford to travel out for your meet this year. I was like, were you gonna let me know? Like, I sent you emails back during the summer inviting you. Oh, sorry, yeah, we just didn't think of it or whatever. And so we went down a team. And then the next year, we decided that, okay, if we can't get the MIAA schools to come, let's see if we can get the UAA schools to come. So we invited Carnegie Mellon and Case. And Case had been begging us to get into this meet. And so I was like, the Case coach is an alum. Let's get him in there. And so they came, and Carnegie Mellon came, and I think Mount Union came, or maybe it was John Carroll. The years are starting to run together. But Mount didn't bring their whole team because they took a bunch of kids out to the Armory to race. Mm-hmm. So that was disappointing. And then Carnegie Mellon didn't like it, so they bailed out. And then COVID happened. And so we kept it, and we had 4 or 5 teams that came or whatever and competed. And it was still a decent meet. And then when we tried to bring it back, I think that's when John Carroll came. But they came the first year, and then the second year, they only sent their throwers because they wanted to go to Spire or Youngstown or whatever, divide their team up and go different places. And so it's been really challenging, and we finally got to a place where we had none of the OAC schools were coming, so we kept Case in there, and they became we couldn't really do the conference thing anymore, but we could do 6 teams. And so it was Case and us, Allegheny and Geneva, and then Oberlin and Ohio Wesleyan. And that's what we had last year. And then everybody agreed to come back again this year. And there's been years where, not all of the Case distance runners will come, and last year Geneva didn't bring all of their distance runners. Their top kids went and ran at Penn State, and they had the intention of coming, but then, having to drive on a Friday night from Geneva to Penn State, and then Penn State back to Geneva, and like their really good kid, his IT band flared up, and so they didn't bring him. And so once again, it's just a little disappointing. And then this year, Geneva got screwed up on the date, and they didn't come. And then one of the other schools just didn't bring their distance kids. And so once again, we're trying to host this meet, and all of the coaches keep telling me, yeah, we're going to bring our whole team, but we can't even get it together enough because every coach has their own agenda. And I heard a bunch of excuses. Oh, well, the meet starts too soon, and our kids race flat, and this, that, and the other thing. I'm like, well, you never told me. Like, we can change the time schedule. We can try. I want to accommodate you guys. You guys have come and support this meet, and I want to turn this into a big event. And we got all the signage, and we did the PR signs and the meet rec signs, and we have the photo backdrop, and we've gotten those. Triangle boards, I call them the Diamond League boards at our meets, to try to make it look cooler, to try to bring a top end meet level atmosphere to it. And obviously we use them for the Twilight meet and all that, but ultimately it came down to one of the coaches that didn't come. We support their meets. We go there for multiple meets a year. And to me, the reason that we go to Oberlin and we go to Ohio Wesleyan and we go to Case Western is because they come and support our meets. But if you're not going to come and support our meets, should we keep going to your place? Because we've had plenty of years where, our women's distance runners were really, really good, and Ohio Wesleyan didn't have as good a distance runners as we had. And so our women's distance runners had to figure it out. You know, we had to have Alesha rabbit, and we had to have other athletes rabbit for our own athletes and do some of those things. But we've always gone and supported, because I felt supported from them, and that means a lot to me. It's a relationship thing, right? And so here we have this team scored event that when we get done at the end of the day, Sports Information can post that we finished first, second, third, fourth out of however many teams, and athletic directors and parents actually understand what that means. And our team understands, hopefully, what that means to the team and what they need to bring to the table, and how their actions and their effort levels can help bring the team up. And you know, it's easy to get done with an Ashland meet, and if you have a bad day, it's not a big deal. But it's a lot tougher on a Dr. T meet if you have a bad day and we were counting on you to score points and you don't score points. And that's what happens in sports. Sports are hard. They're challenging.
So I think what I kind of understand that you're getting at, and what we sort of talked about earlier, is like what you were just saying, there's not a lot of team scored meets in indoor, especially. So you get to the conference meet, and sometimes, especially when you're a freshman, you don't really know what that atmosphere is like.
Right.
You don't know what you're getting to at all. Because college conference meet is very different from a high school conference meet. It's a whole different level of atmosphere. So do you think that it's important to have almost a pre-conference event? Make something a pre-conference event?
Yeah, 100%. I love the All-Ohio meet, you know, and people have been, and ourselves included, we're just as guilty. You know, we've had years where we've gone to All-Ohio with the Kelly Brennans of the world, and she'll go and win multiple events. And I think part of, you know, I was talking with Gianna. Gianna won the 5K yesterday. Alyssa Lochner had a big breakthrough at the All-Ohio meet. I think she got second as a freshman. Bella Pendola I think she won as a freshman. Those are women that ended up going on to have really good careers at the national level and at the conference level. And they were competitive, and they understood what that meant, and we talked about it a lot. And so I think it is important to have those. The Allegheny coach talked about it. Our Dr. T meet is the only meet that they have throughout the whole season that even does a team score. And so throughout the meet, he was coming over to me and talking to me about the team score. He's like, "Oh, I think we're gonna roll you guys. I think we got you on the women's side." Like, he's like, "Our girls are pretty fired up, man. We've been talking about this all week." And like, it just brings another level to our sport that I think can help bring out better performances too. And
it's something that you don't think about, because a lot of people talk about, I love cross country more because of the team aspect, and it's a team sport. And then when it gets to track, it becomes very, very individual. And like you said, everyone is guilty of it. Every single person in the track and field world, in the cross country community, is guilty of it. That's the way that the sport is. Cross country is a team sport, and track is an individual sport. But if we can find a way to incorporate team scores, which is not something that I think is unreasonable to ask, you know, if we can get all of these teams to just come together at a meet, whatever meet that might be, then we don't have to worry about driving 20 hours to a meet in Boston or wherever it may be, you know? It's so, when we were having that conversation yesterday, it really made me realize how important those team score events are, because like you said with the Allegheny coach, you get the entire team kind of having that conversation. And Coach Johnson mentioned something. He was like, we have this team that is more together than we've ever seen. And that came out because we have that team event, and we all wanted to prove, let's win this on our home turf, and let's prove we have a meet here. Let's prove we have something. And it ended up being a really, really cool environment, and it being a really, really cool moment for our team. And if that's something that we can bring to the entire Ohio area and all these teams around here, you know?
I mean, I would love for that Dr. T meet to become a meet that people are banging down the door to get into, because the performances that come out of it every year are so good. You know, and you go and look on the conference list, or you go and look on the national list, and there's just a ton of people that come out of that meet. That's my ultimate goal, is to get that thing to where there's 6 really good teams that are at that meet, really solid, deep teams that come to it, and they bring their whole team because that's where you want to be, is at that meet. And it's frustrating. And I think there is a time and a place for going after individual marks and trying to go after individual times and do some of that stuff. But I think it's really sad, because during COVID, we were forced to go to small meets, and we were forced to stay within the OAC. And guess what? Everybody still ran fast, and everybody still hit marks to go to nationals. We figured it out. And my hope is that a bunch of coaches would jump on board with, hey, we don't have to travel to Boston. We can just do this ourselves. Look at the times from yesterday for the men's DMR. If Mount Union, Baldwin Wallace, Ohio Northern, and John Carroll all ran at Muskingum this past weekend, that would have been a pretty good DMR.
Yeah.
It would have been a pretty good DMR. And we're probably all going to run it at conference, and we're going to have to run fast to win. And it's going to be a crazy awesome environment because all the teams are going to be lining the track and hooting and hollering and yelling, and it's going to be like Tour de France, where you got people leaning in and then pulling back at the last second. And like, it's just such a cool thing. And I just think we could have more of that in our sport. And, you know, the relationship piece of it is, and the frustrating part of it is when teams commit to doing it, but when it doesn't fit their agenda, they back out. And there's no repercussions for it either. You know, I was talking with Sherry Hare. I was like, what would happen if a team just decided not to play a basketball game? Well, they would forfeit. We can't make people forfeit. There is no such thing as a forfeit in track. And so if we truly want to get to the root of what is wrong with track and field, I think that's a big one. I think it's a big one. I think it's so individualized, and we spend all this money traveling all over God's green earth, driving through the snow to get there and back. and I think it's a shame, because we could do a lot of things with a lot of local teams, and people used to run dual meets. And we talked about that yesterday too. The ability and the skill of racing, I think, is lost sometimes on this generation. And even starting in high school, everybody just wants to chase times. Everybody just wants to run fast. I stopped asking this question to recruits because I got so frustrated. Would you rather win a state championship but run a slow time, or run your PR and not score or be on the podium at the state meet? And more kids than not would say, I would rather be off the podium and run a PR. And my thing is no one can ever take away a state championship from you. 10 years down the road, nobody's going to care what your PR is. And your PR is probably going to be obsolete at that point. My collegiate PR wouldn't even get me into nationals right now. And I was ranked number 1, number 2 in the nation for pretty much the entire season. And I wouldn't even be on the list. Wouldn't even be on the list anymore.
So going off of that, I know we talked about this briefly a couple of days ago. There is a huge surge of these super tracks, I guess. Like, we were just at BU chasing fast times. So what is your take on people, obviously we just went to BU to try to run some fast times. So what is your opinion on that pursuit, going off of what you just said and focusing more on trying to win big meets and not as much on times? Like, what is your take?
This could probably turn into its own episode in and of itself, if I'm being completely honest. BU's track is very fast. Mm-hmm. There's no denying that. We literally just watched a dude set the world record in the 5K on that track. 12:44 is very fast. And there's a reason that, A, he is a very good athlete, unbelievable athlete, one of the best in the world. Obviously the best in the world in that particular event. But we could get into the conversion conversation at this point too. And part of the reason that we ended up running at Tufts is because of the conversion.
Yeah.
And I think for people that are either at the national level or trying to get to the national level, I think going to a meet like BU can be very beneficial for multitudes of reasons. Every heat is fast. Dylan, you were in heat 765.
Second
right?
slowest heat, and we still ran 4:17.
And you ran 4:17 and did not win your heat.
Mm-hmm.
And every one of those heats ends up going fast. Doesn't matter. Like, if you win your heat, you're probably going to run a PR or at least a season best. And there were even later heats that were running, 404s and 406s that, they were starting to get into the 413 and 414 marks. And I think putting yourself in that type of an environment can be really, really good, because nationals is an environment where everybody is within a couple of seconds of each other. So your prelim is essentially going to be like your race at BU. Mm-hmm. And your final is going to be the next 2 heats up of the race at BU. And so getting used to competing in that type of an environment, getting used to being around people that can run really fast. You said it on the long run this morning. Sometimes there's a difference between watching it in person and watching it on FlowTrack or watching it on Runner Space. Mm. Watching it online does not do justice to watching Grant Fisher run 401 miles back to back to back and just clip off 30-second laps for 25 laps. It's incredible getting to watch that in person and realizing how freaking smooth those people are. And so I do think there are some benefits to doing it. But we've also gone to Boston before and not had the magic happen for us. Mm-hmm. And we've had some not great races. But I think you can learn a ton from being in that environment that can help you a ton for going to a national meet. The other piece to it is when we go to national meets, we have to jump in a van similar to the one that we're in now, and we usually have to drive it for a long period of time. And you have to be away from home for multiple days at a time, and you have to sleep in a bed that is not your bed, and you have to eat Olive Garden 76 nights in a row and Subway for lunch every single day. And there is something to that too. Getting used to these trips, not everything about these trips is glamorous. There's a lot of Instagram action going on these trips. We are currently sitting in the car. I'm pretty sure I'm driving on a sheet of ice, and we are essentially driving into a blizzard. This is the reality sometimes of being on these trips. And I have a police car driving next to me going double the speed that I am. That'll be fun. But that is part of these trips. And I think, in the DMR, we didn't run bad. but we didn't run great. And you guys looked tired. And having to go to BU and sit in there for 12 hours and then come back the next day and getting used to doing that is a skill. It is a learned skill. It is something you can get better at and you're going to get more comfortable with and all of those things. And so I think there is something to that. Now, when we're at nationals, we don't just go and sit at the facility all day. We will shuttle you back and forth. We try to actually keep you there for the least amount of time that we possibly can. To the point where we're usually sitting at home watching the rest of the meet as we're eating dinner at our Airbnb or in our residence inn. And so I think I answered your question.
Yeah. You definitely touched on it. Very much. So I think that the narrative sort of what you're getting at is the current state of our sport is the things that people watch and the things that people are excited about are these big, extravagant events. And obviously everyone wants to go to them. So I feel like what you're saying is that it is important that we have local meets that we can try to build up. And, you know, in doing that, it's not just a sacrifice for one team. It's not just, you know, if everyone makes the sacrifice, it ends up not being a sacrifice because you're going to have a good meet. You know, if we all didn't go to Boston this weekend and, like you said, just went to Muskingum, I guarantee you we would have ran faster, if not the same times. Like, but I guarantee we would have ran faster. Even if we did open events there, like you get all the guys from Mount and all of our milers in a race, it's going to be a conference preview basically. And we're going to have a pretty freaking good race. And we're going to have similar competition to what we had in Boston, but there's
or Grand Valley, you know, or the teams that went up to Grand Valley.
But it's going to end up being even better because there's it's people you know. It's sometimes people that you personally know, you've spoken to before, you know? So there is a physical and mental aspect to it, right? But then on the other side of it, it's just like you said, you can't recreate the environment of a historical place like BU. You know, we walked in there and I had to let myself sort of be in awe for a minute because
it is cool.
Yeah, that's the kind of thing that just like you said, you have to get used to, and you can't necessarily. It's something that you need to do, but it's not good to do it every single week. I guess is the way to phrase it, because you need to expose yourself. Because when you go to nationals, if that's the first big meet you ever went to,
it's challenging.
Yeah, I guarantee you. So one of like the fact that me and Will were able to go to national meets in high school, go to those New Balance indoor outdoor meets, it ended up being a pretty big advantage because now when we go to our conference meet and stuff, there wasn't as much of a shock factor to it. So yeah,
and I think the Twilight meet is a really good example
100%.
Of what we're trying to do with the Dr. T.
Yes.
Because the first couple years of the Twilight meet, man, it was slim pickings. And I tried to get Youngstown State, who now comes to our meet, by the way, to come over. And there was even a time, and I'm good friends with their coach, and he was going to come over and like help rabbit our steeple. And they bailed and went to Allegheny because at that time, Allegheny was the big meet in the area. And it's challenging because it's like nobody wanted to support our meet. And we still have teams that will travel to Lee and they'll travel to St. Francis out in Chicagoland area that are within like a 2 or 3 hour drive of us, and they're 6 or 7 or 8 hour drive away from those other places. And it's like, guys, just come to our meet. Just like we're doing it here. Like we have the we have the atmosphere. We've done it. Like we've built that thing back up now to the point where it is a really cool event and people look forward to coming to it. And once again, we're trying to do other things. We've got some ideas for t-shirts and and things that we're talking about to try to make it a better event. And so once again, just having, if it wasn't for Walsh University, if it wasn't for Ashland, if it wasn't for, Case Western's sprinters, jumpers, and throwers, if it wasn't for Ashland's throwers and some of their mid-distance, like that meet never would have gotten off the ground. And we were lucky enough that a couple of those local teams, Mountain Union came over and supported it. We got lucky that a couple of those teams came and supported those meets. And so once again, I try to repay the favor back to them. And I remember them doing that. And so I want to try to help them out and support, that's why we go to the Mount Last Chance meet and do some of those things too. But I think like we can do these things, and I feel like we put on good meets and we try to make it a really cool experience. We need the buy-in from some of these other people, and just have the conversations about, hey, what meets can we build up? And hey, I would love to have Lynchburg come to our place, how do we get them to come to our place? Why do we always have to go to New England or Chicago area? Why do we always have to go to the La Crosses and the North Centrals? They don't need our help. They don't need our help. Let's make them come to us. Let's not continue to support and make their lives easier. Let's make them have to figure this stuff out on their own. So that's what I would really like to see. And I think the Twilight meet is I wouldn't say it's there, but it's sure a heck of a lot closer. And it's a heck of a meet at this point. It could be better. It could be better if a couple more, even just local teams bought in, and if we could get one or two teams that, hey man, it's halfway between us and Lee, like which way are you gonna go? It'd be awesome to have some of those teams come and support us too.
And I think, speaking from experience as an athlete that was able to compete there last week, or last year, I train on that track, every single week. I'm there all the time, and I have never seen an environment even close to that. It reminded me of the national meets that I've been to, the high school national meets. I was talking to a photographer from Mile Split, and he's like, I go to get pictures there every single freaking year because I love the environment, and you get incredible photos, and you get really cool moments that are happening there. And honestly, maybe Ashland is the closest thing in a regular season meet that we get to that, but near us in Ohio, we don't have that atmosphere in indoor, really. So developing somewhere that we can have that, I think, is really, really important.
And the Sparky Adams meet used to be that back in the day. Oh, baby. Sparky Adams meet was a huge meet. Kent State, Akron, everybody came to that thing. And then it slowly kind of, Hillsdale took over and it faded away. But and the atmosphere is it. There are people running back and forth on the infield during the 12th heat of the 1500. It's just such a neat, and everybody just wants to see everybody else run fast. Like Hope and Alyssa rabbited the 10K one year just to try to help the John Carroll girls run fast. And so once again, they didn't need to do that, but we did it because we wanted our meet to be better. And Alyssa and Hope understood that, this isn't going to be super fun for you guys, but this might help bring more people into our meet if we can get a really good 10K at this meet.
Yeah.
That's like the last thing that's holding our meet back from really reaching that next level. So
I think we got a lot of good information there, Coach. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we wrap it up here?
Not in this one. As I said, we could probably have multiple episodes off of this stuff. So,
well, thank you guys.
We'll have a series. We'll have a series.
100%.
How to fix track and field.
Because I think it's like you said at the beginning of the episode, these conversations are not had enough, and it's tough. It's tough conversations to have, and it's tough things to talk about because it can be controversial. But changes aren't going to be made, and our sport is going to continue to go down the path that it is, and anything can happen, you know? So it's important to talk about this kind of stuff and come to some sort of a conclusion, right? But thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Relax and Fast.